The text came in at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was sitting in my leather recliner, the one Mora always complained made our living room look like a bachelor pad, nursing a Budweiser and watching the Tigers lose another game they should have won. The familiar ping of my phone barely registered until I saw her name on the screen. "Working late again, honey. Miss you?" Followed by a selfie that made me pause the game. There she was, my wife of 18 years, looking absolutely radiant under what appeared to be harsh office lighting. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled despite the supposed long day, her makeup flawless, that practiced smile she wore to client meetings stretching across her face. The backdrop showed the familiar beige walls of her advertising agency, complete with motivational posters and the kind of industrial carpet that screamed corporate America. I should have just replied with a heart emoji and gone back to watching Detroit's pitching staff implode. Should have, but didn't. Something about the photo nagged at me. Maybe it was the lighting, too warm for those fluorescent bulbs I'd seen during my few visits to her office. Maybe it was how fresh she looked after supposedly working 14 hours straight. Or maybe it was just the instinct you develop after nearly 2 decades with someone, that little voice that whispers when something doesn't fit. I pinched the screen, zooming in on her face, then pulled back to take in the whole image. That's when I saw it. Behind Mora, slightly to the left, was a mirror. Not the small compact mirror from her purse, but a full-size mirror with ornate edges. Definitely not standard office equipment. The reflection showed what was clearly a bathroom, complete with marble countertops and gold fixtures that screamed expensive hotel. And there, unmistakably visible in the shower stall behind the glass, was a man, naked, grinning. Preston Tate. I knew that face, that receding hairline, that smug expression that had irritated me at every company party for the past 3 years. Preston Tate, senior partner at Morrison & Associates, Mora's boss, married father of 2, and apparently the reason my wife had been working so many late nights recently. My hands shook as I screenshot the image, then opened it in my photo editing app to enhance the reflection. There was no mistaking it. The metadata was still intact, GPS coordinates that definitely weren't downtown Detroit where her office was located, but rather the Marriott on the riverfront. The timestamp matched her text perfectly. I sat there for a long moment, beer growing warm in my hand, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal literally reflected back at me. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd been so careful about everything else, but vanity had made her sloppy. She'd wanted to look good in that selfie, and the mirror had been the perfect lighting, the mirror that revealed everything. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Vivian Tate's number. We'd exchanged information years ago during a company barbecue, one of those polite gestures between spouses that you never expect to use. I attached the photo to a text message and typed a single word, "Recognize him?" The response came back in less than 2 minutes. "Thank you." That was it. No questions, no demands for explanation, no shock or disbelief, just gratitude, which told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on, and how many people already knew about it except me. I forwarded the photo to my own email, downloaded the original file, and began cross-referencing Mora's late-night schedule with what I could remember of her recent behavior. The pattern was there once I looked for it. The new lingerie she claimed was for her own confidence, the sudden interest in expensive wine, the way she'd started showering immediately when she got home instead of collapsing on the couch like she used to. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mora. "Don't wait up. This project is going to take all night." I looked at the timestamp on her selfie, then at this new message. She was still there, still with him, still lying to my face even after sending me photographic evidence of her affair. I printed a copy of the photo on our home printer, the one she'd insisted we needed for important documents. This seemed important enough. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, pulled back her side of the comforter, and slid the printed image under her pillow. Then I went back downstairs, opened another beer, and started planning. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., same as always. 23 years of getting up early for work had trained my body better than any alarm clock. Mora's side of the bed was still empty, still cold. Her car wasn't in the driveway. By 6:15, I was dressed and heading to my used car lot on the east side of town. Reid's Reliable Rides wasn't much to look at. A converted gas station with a gravel lot that held maybe 30 vehicles on a good day, but it was mine. After the corporate layoffs 3 years ago, when Morrison and Associates had restructured and somehow forgot to find a place for their former finance director, I'd used my severance to buy the lot from old Pete Kowalski. Mora had been supportive then, or at least she'd seemed to be. "This is your chance to be your own boss, Reid," she'd said, rubbing my shoulders as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by loan paperwork and business plans. I believe in you. Right? She believed in me so much she'd started sleeping with my former boss 6 months later. I was updating inventory on a 2018 Honda Civic when my phone rang. Jax Morrison, no relation to the advertising agency despite the name, had been my friend since high school and my boxing coach since I'd started hitting the gym again after the layoffs. You sound like garbage, he said without preamble. What happened? I told him about the selfie, the mirror, the whole sordid situation. Jax listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. He was the kind of guy who had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. So, what's your next move? He asked when I finished. I'm not sure yet, but I'm not just going to roll over and take it. Good. You want to hit the gym later? Nothing clears your head like working the heavy bag. Yeah, that sounds perfect. I hung up and went back to work, but my mind kept drifting to Mora. Where was she? Still at the hotel? Had she gone home and found the photo? Was she panicking, or was she so confident in her deception that she'd assume it was some kind of mistake? My question was answered at 11:30 when she called. Reid, we need to talk. Her voice was tight, controlled, the same tone she used with difficult clients. I'm sure we do. Where are you? I'm at home. I found your little message. Which message was that? A pause. Don't play games with me. The photo under my pillow? What exactly are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, Mora. I already proved it. The question is what you're going to do about it. Another pause, longer this time. It's not what you think. Really? Because what I think is that you've been screwing your boss in hotel rooms while telling me you're working late. The metadata on your own photo confirms the location, the timestamps match your text, and his wife already thanked me for the heads up. So please enlighten me about what I'm missing. Silence. Mora? I need some time to think. Take all the time you need, but do it somewhere else. I hung up and immediately called our bank. Joint accounts were about to become a liability, and I wasn't going to let her drain our savings to fund her new lifestyle. I transferred half of everything into a new account in my name only, perfectly legal since it was community property, and I had every right to protect my interests. Next, I called my lawyer. Tom Patterson had handled the purchase of the car lot and had been a friend since college. He listened to my story with the same professional calm he brought to every legal matter. You've got grounds for divorce, obviously. The photo evidence is pretty compelling, especially with the metadata intact. But Reid, I have to ask, what's your end game here? You want a clean split, or are you looking for something else? I want her to understand that actions have consequences. I want Preston Tate to understand that there's a price for what he's done, and I want everyone who's been whispering behind my back to know exactly what kind of people they really are. Okay, that's not legal advice, but I understand. Document everything, keep copies of all communications, and don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or threats. You want the moral high ground when this goes public. After I hung up with Tom, I sat in my office looking out at the lot. A young couple was walking around a blue Camry, the woman pointing out features while the man kicked the tires like that would tell him anything useful. Normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems like whether they could afford the extended warranty. I envied them. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Vivian Tate. Can we meet? I think we have a lot to discuss. The coffee shop Vivian chose was neutral territory, a chain place in the suburbs, far from downtown where either of our spouses might spot us. I arrived early and claimed a corner table where we could talk without being overheard. Vivian Tate looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for wealthy suburban wife. Perfectly highlighted hair, designer workout clothes that had never seen actual exercise, and the kind of subtle jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. But her eyes were sharp, calculating, and absolutely furious. How long have you known? She asked without preamble, sliding into the chair across from me. About 12 hours. You? 6 months. She stirred her latte with mechanical precision. I hired a private investigator after I found a hotel receipt in Preston's jacket. Your wife isn't his first affair, Reid, but she's definitely the most brazen. That stung more than I expected. Most brazen how? The others were discreet. Weekend conferences in other cities, business trips that ran long. But Mora? She's been pushing him to leave me. She wants him to divorce me and marry her. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How do you know that? Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. Preston's not as smart as he thinks he is. He leaves his phone unlocked, takes calls on speaker when he thinks I'm not around. Would you like to hear some of their conversations? She pressed play. Mora's voice filled the space between us, tinny but unmistakable. I'm tired of sneaking around, Preston. Reid's a loser who sells used cars. You're a senior partner at a prestigious firm. Why are we pretending this is complicated? Preston's response was equally clear. These things take time, darling. Vivian gets half of everything if I file first. But if she files for adultery, I can claim she drove me away with her coldness. Better settlement terms. My hands clenched into fists. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to destroy both of our marriages for their own benefit, calculating the financial angles like it was just another business deal. There's more, Vivian said, stopping the recording. But I think you get the picture. They've been planning this for months. The only question is whether we're going to let them control the narrative. What do you have in mind? She smiled, and for the first time I understood why Preston might have wanted to step out on her. There was something predatory in that expression, something that suggested Vivian Tate was not a woman you wanted as an enemy. I've been documenting everything: bank records, hotel receipts, phone logs, emails. My attorney says I have enough evidence to not only win the divorce, but to pursue a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Preston's firm has a morality clause in their partnership agreement. If this becomes public, he won't just lose his marriage, he'll lose his career. And Mora? That's where you come in. I can destroy Preston professionally, but your wife works for his firm. If she's terminated for cause, say for having an inappropriate relationship with a superior, she loses her severance, her references, and her professional reputation. In this industry, that's a career-ending move. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. You want to coordinate our attacks. I want to make sure they understand exactly what they've thrown away and exactly what it's going to cost them. Are you in? I thought about Mora's voice on that recording, dismissing me as a loser, reducing our 18-year marriage to an inconvenience to be managed. I thought about Preston's calculation, his assumption that he could manipulate both of our lives for his financial benefit. I'm in. What's the first step? We document everything, build an airtight case, and then we strike simultaneously. Preston gets served at work, in front of his colleagues. Mora gets called into HR for a disciplinary hearing. They won't have time to coordinate their stories or protect each other. She slid a business card across the table. My attorney. Tell him I sent you. He specializes in high-conflict divorces, and he's very, very good at what he does. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the layoffs 3 years ago, a sense of purpose. For months, I'd been drifting, going through the motions of rebuilding my life, while Mora had apparently been planning to abandon it entirely. Not anymore. My phone rang as I was pulling out of the parking lot. Mora. Reid, I'm coming to the lot. We need to discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss, Mora. I know about Preston, I know about the hotels, and I know about your plans to divorce me so you can marry him. Silence. Then. How could you possibly? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's over. Tom Patterson is my attorney. Have your lawyer call him. Reid, please, if you just let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That you think I'm a loser who doesn't deserve the truth? That you've been planning to destroy our marriage for your own financial benefit? More silence. I'll be home tonight to pack some things. I'd prefer if you weren't there. I hung up before she could respond and headed back to the lot. I had work to do. The next morning brought the first sign that our plan was working. I was opening the lot when Jax pulled up in his battered pickup truck, 2 cups of gas station coffee in hand. You look better, he said, handing me one of the cups. More focused. I've got a plan now. That helps. Want to share? I told him about my meeting with Vivian, about the recordings, about our coordinated approach to destroying both Mora and Preston simultaneously. Jax listened with the same attention he brought to analyzing opponents before a boxing match. Sounds like you've got them outgunned, he said when I finished. But Reid, you need to be careful. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. What do you mean? I mean your wife isn't stupid, and neither is her boss. Once they figure out you're working with his wife, they're going to start looking for ways to fight back. You need to be ready for that. He was right, of course. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence and planning my attack that I hadn't considered how they might respond. But before I could worry too much about it, my phone rang. Mr. Reid, this is Jennifer Walsh from Morrison & Associates. I'm the HR director. I wonder if you might have a few minutes to speak with me today? Interesting. What about? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Would you be available to come to our offices this afternoon? I agreed to meet her at 3 p.m. and spent the rest of the morning wondering what she wanted. Had Vivian already made her move? Was this about the expense report discrepancies I'd anonymously reported? Or was this something else entirely? Morrison and Associates occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and the kind of modern art that costs more than most people's annual salaries. I'd been here before, of course, for company parties and the occasional lunch meeting back when I'd worked for them. But walking through those doors as an outsider, knowing what I now knew about my wife's activities here, felt surreal. Jennifer Walsh was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of professional demeanor that suggested she'd seen every type of workplace drama imaginable. Her office was on the 15th floor, with a view of the river and the hotel where Mora had sent that fateful selfie. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Reid. I'll get straight to the point. We've received some anonymous reports about potential policy violations involving your wife and one of our senior partners. I was hoping you might be able to provide some context." I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of policy violations?" "Inappropriate relationships between supervisors and subordinates, misuse of company resources, potential expense account fraud, the kind of things that require thorough investigation." She opened a file folder and spread several documents across her desk. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, expense reports, all with Preston's signature and Mora's name attached as his client dinner companion. "These expenses were submitted over the past 6 months," Jennifer continued. "The pattern suggests regular personal meetings disguised as business expenses. That's a terminable offense under our employee handbook." I studied the papers, recognizing several of the dates as nights when Mora had told me she was working late. "What do you need from me?" "Honestly, confirmation that your wife wasn't actually working during these times. If she was conducting personal business while claiming to be on company time, that's grounds for immediate termination." I pulled out my phone and showed her the selfie. This was taken Tuesday night at 9:47 p.m. She texted me that she was working late, but as you can see, she was actually at the Marriott with Mr. Tate. Jennifer examined the photo carefully, zooming in on the reflection, just as I had. "This is very helpful, Mr. Reid. Would you be willing to provide a written statement to that effect?" "Absolutely." She handed me a legal pad, and I wrote out everything, the timeline of Mora's supposed late nights, the inconsistencies in her stories, the evidence I'd gathered. When I finished, Jennifer made copies of everything and filed them in what was clearly becoming a substantial investigation folder. "What happens now?" I asked. "We complete our investigation and make a determination about appropriate disciplinary action. I can't discuss specifics, but I will say that we take these matters very seriously. Our reputation depends on maintaining the highest ethical standards." As I left the building, I felt a grim satisfaction. The wheels were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. Mora and Preston had thought they were so clever, so careful, but their arrogance had made them sloppy. They'd left a paper trail a mile long, and now it was going to destroy them both. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Phase 1 complete. Preston's being served tomorrow morning. Are you ready for Phase 2? I was more than ready. The call came at 10:15 a.m. on Thursday. I was negotiating with a customer over a 2019 Nissan Sentra when my phone rang with Mora's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, finished the sale, and then listened to her message. "Reid, something terrible has happened. Preston's been suspended pending an investigation. They're saying he misused company funds, that he was having inappropriate relationships with subordinates. They want to interview me this afternoon. I think someone is trying to destroy us. Please call me back." The desperation in her voice was almost satisfying. Almost. I was debating whether to call her back when a black BMW pulled into my lot. Preston Tate climbed out, looking nothing like the confident executive I'd seen at company parties. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his face was flushed with anger. "You son of a," he started, then caught himself as he noticed my customer walking past. "We need to talk. Now." "I'm working, Preston. Make an appointment." "Don't play games with me. I know what you did. I know you sent that photo to my wife. I know you talked to HR, and I know you're trying to destroy my career out of spite." I walked over to him, close enough that he had to look up slightly to meet my eyes. "Spite? You think this is about spite? You've been screwing my wife for months, lying to both of our families, stealing from your company to pay for your little romantic getaways, and you think I'm the problem here. Mora and I are in love. You wouldn't understand." "Love?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough that Preston took a step back. "You want to hear what love sounds like, Preston?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording Vivian had shared with me, the one where Mora called me a loser and Preston calculated the financial benefits of destroying our marriages. Preston's face went white as his own voice filled the air between us. "That's what your love sounds like," I said when the recording ended. "Two selfish people using each other and planning to throw away their families for money and convenience. You want to call that love? Go ahead. but don't expect me to respect it. Preston was quiet for a long moment, staring at the phone. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller, less certain. How did you get that recording? Your wife isn't as clueless as you thought. She's been documenting everything for months, Preston. Every hotel receipt, every lie, every calculation about how to maximize your settlement. She played you just as much as you played her. This is insane. Vivian filed for divorce, I'm suspended from work, and now you're trying to destroy Mora too? What's the point? What do you possibly gain from this? I stepped closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck to maintain eye contact. I gained the satisfaction of knowing that actions have consequences. You thought you could take whatever you wanted, hurt whoever you needed to hurt, and walk away richer for it. You were wrong. And what about Mora? She's going to lose everything, her job, her reputation, her financial security. Is that really what you want for someone you supposedly loved? I did love her. For 18 years, I loved her completely, supported her career, built a life with her, and she threw it all away for you. So yes, Preston, I want her to understand exactly what she's lost and exactly what it cost her. Preston looked around the lot, at the modest cars and the converted gas station that served as my office. You're pathetic. You're destroying 2 careers, 2 families because you can't handle the fact that she outgrew you. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. Get off my lot. What? You heard me. Get in your fancy car and get off my property. And Preston, if you ever set foot here again, if you ever contact me again, if you so much as drive past this place, I will make sure every client your firm has ever had knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Do you understand me? Preston stared at me for another moment, then turned and walked back to his BMW. He peeled out of the lot, spraying gravel, but I could see his hands shaking on the steering wheel. My phone rang again. Mora. Reid, please, you have to help me. They're calling it a disciplinary hearing, but I think they are going to fire me. Jennifer Walsh has all these documents, these expense reports, and she's asking about nights when I told you I was working late. Someone gave them your phone number and they want to interview you. Please don't do this to me. I already did it, Mora. I gave them a written statement this morning confirming that you weren't working during those times when you claimed to be. I showed them the selfie you sent me from the hotel. I told them everything. Silence. Then, in a voice so small I barely recognized it. Why? Because you lied to me. Because you betrayed our marriage. Because you planned to destroy our life together for your own benefit. Because when you thought no one was listening, you called me a loser who didn't deserve the truth. I never said that. I have the recording, Mora. More silence. Where are you going to go? I asked. When they fire you this afternoon, when your professional reputation is destroyed, when you can't get references for another job in advertising, where exactly are you planning to go? Back to Preston? He's been suspended too. His wife is divorcing him, and he's probably going to lose his partnership. You bet everything on him, and you both lost. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You made dozens of choices, every single day for months. You chose to lie to me, to betray our marriage, to plan our divorce behind my back. You chose Preston over me, his money over our life together, his promises over 18 years of marriage. Those weren't mistakes, Mora. They were decisions. And now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and sat in my office, staring out at the lot. A family was looking at a minivan, the parents discussing monthly payments while their kids played in the back seat. Normal people, dealing with normal problems, building normal lives. I envied them again, but not as much as I had yesterday. The text from Vivian came at 4:30 p.m. It's done. Both terminated for cause. No severance, no references. Preston's partnership is under review. How do you feel? How did I feel? Empty, mostly. Satisfied in a grim way, but empty. I'd spent so much energy planning their destruction that I hadn't thought much about what would come after. I was closing the lot when Jax pulled up, right on schedule for our evening training session, but instead of heading to the gym, he suggested we grab a beer at Mickey's, the dive bar where we'd been drinking since we were old enough to get served without being carded. You look like a man who won a war but lost everything else, he said once we'd claimed our usual booth in the back. That's about right. Want to talk about it? I told him about Preston's visit, about Mora's desperate phone calls, about the systematic destruction of both their careers. Jax listened without judgment, the way he always did. So what now? He asked when I finished. Now I file for divorce, sell the house, and try to figure out what the rest of my life looks like. That's not what I meant. I looked at him. What did you mean? I meant what happens to you, Reid. You've spent months planning revenge, and now you've got it. But revenge doesn't fill the hole they left behind. It doesn't give you back the marriage you thought you had, or the future you thought you were building. So, what now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Reid, this is Kira Chen. I'm a friend of Mora's. I think we need to talk. I'd heard Mora mention Kira before. They'd worked together at Morrison & Associates before Kira moved to HR at a competing firm. I'd met her once or twice at company events, remembered her as quiet, observant, the kind of person who listened more than she talked. What about? About what really happened between Mora and Preston, about who's been pulling the strings behind the scenes, about why you might want to be very careful about trusting Vivian Tate. That got my attention. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's a coffee shop on Maple Street called The Grind. Do you know it? I did. It was in a different part of town from where I'd met Vivian, more working class, less likely to attract the downtown professional crowd. 10 a.m.? Perfect. And Mr. Reid, bring copies of any evidence you've shared with Vivian. You're going to want to compare notes. She hung up before I could ask what she meant. Who was that? Jax asked. Someone who thinks I don't know the whole story. Do you? I thought about everything that had happened over the past week. The selfie, the recordings, the coordinated attack on both Mora and Preston. It had all seemed so clean, so perfectly orchestrated, maybe too perfectly. I'm starting to wonder. The next morning, I arrived at the Grind 15 minutes early and claimed a table near the back. Kira showed up precisely at 10, carrying a leather portfolio that looked stuffed with documents. She was smaller than I remembered, maybe 5'4", with straight dark hair and the kind of unremarkable features that would make her easy to overlook in a crowd. But her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely focused on me. Thank you for coming, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I wasn't sure you would. You said I might not know the whole story. I'm curious what you meant. She opened the portfolio and pulled out a stack of papers. Tell me about your relationship with Vivian Tate. How did you first make contact? I sent her the selfie after I discovered Mora's affair. She texted back thanking me. We met, compared notes, and decided to coordinate our response. And she had recordings of conversations between Mora and Preston? Yes, very incriminating ones. Kira nodded and slid a document across the table. This is a phone record for Preston Tate's cell phone, obtained through legal discovery in his divorce proceedings. Look at the highlighted entries. I scanned the document. The highlighted calls were all to the same number, labeled as V. Tate Home. But the dates were wrong. According to this record, Preston had called his wife dozens of times over the past 6 months, including during times when I knew he was with Mora. I don't understand. Look at the duration of the calls. Some of them are over an hour long. These aren't quick check-ins or arguments, Reid. These are long, detailed conversations between Preston and his wife, happening at the same time he was supposedly conducting a secret affair. I stared at the document, trying to process what she was telling me. You're saying they were working together? I'm saying Vivian knew about the affair from the beginning because Preston told her about it. I'm saying those recordings she played for you were made with his knowledge and consent. I'm saying you've been played by both of them. She pulled out another document, bank records showing large transfers from Preston's accounts to offshore investments, all dated within the past 3 months. They've been moving assets, Reid, hiding money in accounts that won't be subject to property division in the divorce. Vivian files for adultery, gets a sympathetic judge, walks away with most of their legitimate assets while the hidden money stays safe. But why involve me? Why destroy Mora's career? Because your wife was the wild card. She actually thought Preston was going to leave Vivian for her. She was pushing him to file for divorce, threatening to expose the affair if he didn't. They needed her discredited, fired, financially ruined. They needed her to look like a home-wrecking opportunist rather than a woman who'd been lied to and manipulated. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And I helped them do it. You were the perfect weapon, Reid. The betrayed husband seeking justice. They fed you just enough truth to make you dangerous, then pointed you at the target they wanted destroyed. I thought about my meeting with Vivian, about how quickly she'd produced evidence, how perfectly her plan had aligned with my desire for revenge. I thought about Preston's visit to my lot, his apparent desperation and anger. Had that been an act too? How do you know all this? Because I've been investigating them for months. Mora came to me 6 weeks ago, confused about Preston's behavior, worried that he was pulling away from her. She asked me to help her figure out what was going on. I started digging, and I found the financial records, the phone logs, the evidence of coordination between Preston and Vivian. Why didn't you tell her? I tried. But by then, you'd already started your campaign against her. She was so devastated by your betrayal, so focused on trying to save her marriage that she couldn't see the bigger picture. And honestly, I wasn't sure you'd listen to me either. You were so angry, so focused on revenge, that I thought you might be part of their plan. I stared at the documents spread across the table, evidence of a deception far more sophisticated than anything I'd imagined. What do you want from me? I want you to help me expose them, the real them. Vivian and Preston have destroyed your marriage, your wife's career, and probably several other lives along the way. They're going to walk away from this richer than when they started, while you and Mora lose everything. Mora made her choices. Mora was manipulated by a master manipulator, just like you were. The difference is that you had the power to destroy her, and you used it. She's the victim here, Reid. You both are. I thought about Mora's voice on those recordings, calling me a loser, dismissing our marriage. The recordings were edited, taken out of context. Preston would steer conversations in certain directions, get Mora to say things that sounded damning when played back without context. Vivian is very good with audio editing software. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything Kira had told me. If she was right, then I'd been played from the beginning. My desire for revenge had been weaponized against my own wife, and I'd been too blind with rage to see it. What do you need me to do? Kira smiled for the first time since she'd sat down. I need you to help me prove that Preston and Vivian have been working together all along. And then I need you to help me make sure they face the consequences for what they've done. How? By giving them exactly what they think they want, by playing along with their game until we can expose them publicly, completely, and permanently. She pulled out one final document, a copy of the selfie that had started everything, but this version was different. Enhanced, sharpened, showing details I hadn't noticed before. Look at the reflection again, Reid. Really look at it. I studied the image, focusing on the mirror behind Mora. Preston was there. Yes, but now I could see something else. A tripod in the corner of the bathroom, a camera mounted on it, a red recording light clearly visible. They were making a video, Kira said quietly. The whole thing was staged, Reid. The selfie, the accidental revelation, everything. They wanted you to find out about the affair, but they wanted you to find out in a way that would make you destroy Mora while leaving them free to profit from the chaos. I stared at the photo, at the evidence of manipulation so sophisticated that I'd never seen it coming. They'd played me perfectly, used my love for my wife and my sense of betrayal as weapons against her. Are you ready to get them back? Kira asked. I looked up at her, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than emptiness. Tell me what we need to do. The plan Kira outlined was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to give Preston and Vivian exactly what they wanted, a public, messy divorce that would make them look like the victims of circumstances beyond their control. But we were also going to document everything, build an ironclad case for fraud, and then expose them at the moment when they thought they'd won. The key, Kira explained as we walked through the details, is making them believe they're still in control. They think you're a useful idiot who served his purpose. They think Mora is too destroyed to fight back. They think they've covered their tracks perfectly. But they haven't? Not even close. Preston's been sloppy with his digital security, and Vivian's been overconfident about her audio editing skills. I've been documenting everything, and I have friends in forensic accounting who owe me favors. She handed me a new phone, a burner with a single contact programmed in. This is how we communicate from now on. Your regular phone might be compromised. Vivian's been asking very specific questions about your activities, which suggests she has a source of information. That made sense. Too much of what had happened over the past week had felt orchestrated, too convenient. What's the first step? You're going to call Vivian and tell her you're having second thoughts about destroying Mora. You're going to say that seeing her lose her job made you realize you still love her, that you want to try to work things out. Vivian will panic because the last thing she needs is for you and Mora to reconcile and start comparing notes. And then? Then she'll try to convince you that Mora doesn't deserve forgiveness. She'll probably offer you more evidence of the affair, maybe even arrange for you to catch them together one more time. She needs you to stay angry, stay focused on revenge, because that's the only way their plan works. I thought about it. What if Mora won't talk to me? After everything I've done, she might not be willing to listen. She'll listen. She's staying at the extended stay on Route 9, room 247. She's been calling in sick to temp agencies, spending most of her time in her room, trying to figure out how her life fell apart so completely. She's vulnerable, isolated, and desperate for someone to believe in her again. How do you know all that? Because I've been checking on her. She's my friend, Reid, and I've been watching her destroy herself with guilt and shame over what happened. She blames herself for the affair, for the lies, for the destruction of your marriage. She has no idea she was being manipulated. I took the burner phone and headed back to my lot, my mind racing. If Kira was right, then everything I thought I knew about the past week was wrong. Mora wasn't a calculating adulteress. She was a victim of the same manipulation that had turned me into a weapon against her. But if Kira was wrong, if this was just another layer of deception, then I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. I called Vivian from my office, using my regular phone so she wouldn't suspect anything. "Reid, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "Not great, actually. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I'm starting to wonder if we went too far." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Maura lost her job, her reputation, everything. I know she betrayed me, but seeing her like this... I still love her, Vivian. I'm thinking about trying to work things out." The pause was longer this time. "Reid, I understand that you're feeling conflicted, but you can't let sentiment cloud your judgment. Maura made her choices. She chose Preston over you, chose to lie and cheat and plan your destruction. You can't just forgive that." "Maybe not, but I need to at least talk to her, try to understand why she did what she did." "That's a terrible idea. She'll just manipulate you again, make you feel sorry for her, convince you that somehow this is all your fault. You've come too far to let her pull you back into her web of lies." I could hear the desperation creeping into Vivian's voice, the careful control starting to slip. "I appreciate your concern, but this is my decision to make." "Reid, wait. Before you do anything rash, there's something else you need to see. Something that will help you understand exactly what kind of person your wife really is." "What kind of something?" "Meet me tonight. Same place as before, 8 o'clock. I'll show you evidence that will change your mind about trying to reconcile with her." She hung up before I could respond, but that was fine. The hook was set. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about what I was going to say to Mora, how I was going to explain everything that had happened without sounding like I'd completely lost my mind. The truth was complex, layered with deception and manipulation, and I wasn't sure I understood it all myself. At 7:30, I drove to the Extended Stay America on Route 9. It was the kind of place that catered to business travelers on tight budgets and people going through personal crises. Clean but impersonal, designed for temporary stays that sometimes stretched into months. Room 247 was on the second floor, overlooking the parking lot. I stood outside the door for a full minute before knocking, trying to find the right words. Mora answered wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman I'd married 20 years ago, but also fragile in a way that made my chest tight. "Reid, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me enter. The room was small but tidy, with evidence of a life in limbo. Takeout containers, a stack of job applications, tissues scattered on the nightstand. "I know what you're going to say," she said before I could speak. "That I got what I deserved, that I brought this on myself, that I have no right to feel sorry for myself. You're right. I made terrible choices. I lied to you. I betrayed our marriage. I don't expect forgiveness. That's not why I'm here." She looked at me with confusion. "Then why?" I pulled out the documents Kira had given me, spread them on the small table by the window. "Because I think we've both been played. Because I think Preston and Vivian have been working together from the beginning. Because I think your affair was orchestrated to destroy both of us while they profit from the chaos." Mora stared at the papers, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning understanding. "The phone records show that Preston was talking to his wife for hours during times when he was supposedly conducting a secret affair with you. The bank records show them moving assets offshore. The audio analysis shows that those recordings were edited, taken out of context." She sank into the room's single chair, her hands shaking as she picked up the financial documents. "But the affair was real, Reid. I did sleep with him. I did lie to you about working late. I did plan to ask you for a divorce." "I know. But why? What made you think Preston was serious about leaving his wife for you?" "He said..." She stopped, her brow furrowing as she thought back. "He said Vivian was cold, that their marriage had been over for years, that he was only staying for the kids. He said he'd never felt about anyone the way he felt about me." "When did he first approach you?" "About 8 months ago, right after you bought the car lot. He said he was impressed by how supportive I was being, how strong I was during your career transition. He said you were lucky to have me." I felt pieces clicking into place. "And when did the relationship turn physical?" 3 months later. He'd been pursuing me, I guess. complimenting me, confiding in me about his marriage, making me feel special. When it finally happened, he said it proved that what we had was real, that we were meant to be together. And when did he start talking about divorce? Right after Christmas. He said he couldn't stand living a lie anymore, that he wanted to be with me openly. But he needed time to figure out the financial aspects, to make sure his wife didn't take him to the cleaners. I showed her the timeline Kira had constructed, matching Preston's pursuit of her with specific financial moves he and Vivian had been making. They needed you emotionally invested, Mora. They needed you pushing for divorce, making demands, becoming the other woman who broke up their marriage. It gave Vivian grounds to file for adultery while making you look like the aggressor. Mora was quiet for a long time, studying the documents. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. I destroyed our marriage for nothing. I threw away 18 years for a man who was using me. We both got used, Mora. They turned my love for you into a weapon against you. They turned your loneliness and insecurity into a weapon against me. We did their dirty work for them. So what do we do now? I told her about Kira's plan, about the evidence we were gathering, about the trap we were setting for Preston and Vivian. As I talked, I watched something change in her expression, the defeated acceptance replaced by anger, then by determination. They're going to pay for this, she said quietly. Both of them. Are you sure you want to get involved? This could get messy, and you've already lost so much. She looked at me with an expression I remembered from our early years together, when we'd been partners facing the world as a team. Reid, they destroyed my career, my reputation, my marriage. They used my feelings against me and turned my husband into my enemy. Of course, I want to get involved. It might not fix things between us, Mora. Even if we expose them, even if we prove we were both manipulated, that doesn't erase what happened. The affair was real. The lies were real. The damage might be too extensive to repair. I know, but maybe we can at least go down fighting together instead of destroying each other for their benefit. I looked at my wife, estranged, betrayed, manipulated, but still the woman I'd loved for 2 decades, and felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Hope. Okay, let's do this. The meeting with Vivian was set for 8 p.m. at the same coffee shop where we'd first conspired together. I arrived 15 minutes early, positioned myself where I could see the entire space, and activated the recording app on both my regular phone and the burner Kira had given me. Vivian walked in precisely on time, carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression of concerned friendship that I now recognized as completely artificial. She'd perfected the art of manipulation so thoroughly that even knowing what she was, I found myself almost believing her performance. Reid, thank you for meeting me. I know this is difficult, but I really think you need to see this before you make any decisions about reconciling with Mora. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were printed emails, text messages, and what appeared to be a hotel registration record. These are from last week, she said, her voice heavy with manufactured sympathy. After Mora was fired, after she lost everything, she contacted Preston. She begged him to leave me, promised him that if he'd just file for divorce, she'd wait for him no matter how long it took. I studied the documents, noting the timestamps, the language, the desperate tone of the messages. If they were real, they painted a picture of a woman so obsessed with her lover that she couldn't accept the relationship was over, even after losing her career. And Preston's response? He told her it was over. He said the investigation had made it impossible for them to continue, that he needed to focus on saving his marriage and his career. He was trying to do the right thing, Reid. I looked up at her, this woman who had played me so expertly, who had turned my marriage into a weapon against itself. Where did you get these? Preston showed them to me. He felt terrible about what had happened, about how his moment of weakness had destroyed so many lives. He wanted me to see that he was committed to making our marriage work. And you believe him? I want to believe him. But more importantly, I want you to understand that Mora hasn't learned anything from what happened. She's still the same selfish, manipulative woman who destroyed your marriage. Reconciling with her would be the biggest mistake of your life. I folded the documents and put them back in the envelope. These are very convincing. They're the truth, Reid. I know it's painful, but you needed to see who your wife really is. Actually, Vivian, I think I'm finally starting to see who everyone really is. Something in my tone must have alerted her, because her expression shifted slightly, the mask of concern slipping just enough to reveal the calculation underneath. What do you mean? I mean, I know about the phone records showing Preston called you during his supposed secret meetings with Mora. I know about the offshore accounts where you've been hiding assets. I know about the staged selfie, the edited recordings, The whole elaborate scheme you and your husband cooked up to destroy my marriage while protecting your own finances. Vivian went very still. That's absurd? Who told you that? Does it matter? The evidence speaks for itself. You've been working together from the beginning, haven't you? The affair was real, but everything else, the secrecy, the guilt, the financial planning, was all theater designed to manipulate Mora and me into destroying each other. You're being paranoid. Am I? Then explain why Preston called you for 2 hours the night he supposedly spent in a hotel room with my wife. Explain why you've been moving money into untraceable accounts for the past 6 months. Explain why that selfie shows a camera setup in the bathroom, like you were making a recording of their encounter. Vivian's composure cracked completely. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. See, while you were busy manipulating me into destroying my wife's career, someone else was documenting your real activities. Financial records, phone logs, digital forensics on those edited audio files. It's all been preserved and analyzed by professionals. I stood up, looking down at this woman who had orchestrated so much pain and destruction for her own benefit. The question now is what happens next. You and Preston have committed fraud, conspiracy, and probably a dozen other crimes. You've destroyed careers, marriages, and lives for money. What do you think the consequences should be? You can't expose us without exposing yourself, she said desperately. You participated in destroying Mora's career. You provided evidence to her employer. You're complicit in everything that happened. You're right. I am complicit. I let my anger and hurt make me into a weapon you could use against my own wife. But here's the difference between us, Vivian. I was manipulated into my actions. You planned yours. I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Vivian? Those documents you just showed me, the ones supposedly proving Mora was still pursuing Preston after she was fired. The metadata shows they were created this afternoon on your home computer. You might want to work on your forgery skills. I left her sitting there, staring at the envelope of fake evidence, and walked out to my car. The burner phone was already ringing. How did it go? Kira asked. She took the bait, tried to show me forged documents to keep me angry at Mora. When I confronted her with what we know, she basically confirmed everything. Good. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. Are you and Mora ready? I looked across the parking lot toward the extended stay, where my wife was waiting to hear how the evening had gone. We're ready. Then let's finish this. The next morning, Kira's plan went into motion with military precision. At 9 a.m., Preston received a call from what he thought was a potential new client, a wealthy businessman looking to invest in commercial real estate, someone who'd been referred by a mutual friend and wanted to meet immediately. At 9:15 a.m., Vivian received a similar call from someone claiming to represent a high-end divorce attorney, someone who'd heard about her case and wanted to discuss representation for what could be a very lucrative settlement. Both meetings were scheduled for 10 a.m. at locations across town from each other, ensuring that Preston and Vivian couldn't coordinate their stories or warn each other about what was coming. What they didn't know was that both meetings were setups designed to get them on record discussing their scheme, their hidden assets, and their plans for the future. At 10:05 a.m., while Preston was explaining to a supposed investor how he'd managed to protect his assets during his divorce proceedings, FBI agents were executing search warrants at both his office and his home. At 10:07 a.m., while Vivian was detailing her husband's infidelities and her plans for maximizing her settlement, federal prosecutors were reviewing evidence of wire fraud, conspiracy, and tax evasion. By 10:30 a.m., both Preston and Vivian were in federal custody, and their carefully constructed scheme was unraveling faster than they could have imagined. I watched the news coverage from my office at the car lot, Mora sitting beside me as reporters described the arrests of 2 prominent local figures on charges related to an elaborate fraud scheme. The story was still developing, but the basic facts were clear. A wealthy couple had orchestrated fake marital problems to hide assets and defraud the court system, destroying several innocent lives in the process. It's really over, Mora said quietly. This part is, but we still have a lot of work to do. She nodded. I know. Rebuilding our reputations, figuring out our finances, deciding what happens to our marriage. It's going to take time. Maybe. Or maybe some things are too broken to fix. We sat in silence for a while, watching our former tormentors being led away in handcuffs on the television screen. The news anchor's voice faded into background noise as the images repeated, doors opening, uniforms closing in, faces lowered in shame. There was satisfaction in seeing consequences finally arrive, in knowing the truth had teeth after all. But it didn't undo the nights of doubt, the losses we'd absorbed quietly, the fractures that still ached beneath the surface. Reid, Mora said eventually. Yeah? She hesitated, fingers twisting together in her lap. I know I don't have the right to ask this, and I know you might not be able to give me an answer right now, but... She took a breath. Do you think there's any chance we could try again? Not pick up where we left off, but start over. Build something new. I turned to look at her. Not the woman she'd been before everything broke, and not the woman I'd imagined she was during the worst of it, but the woman she was now. Scarred, honest, still standing. We'd both been burned by the same fire, and there was no pretending otherwise. I don't know, I said, and meant it. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. She nodded, relief and fear crossing her face at the same time. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in pretty words. It was something quieter, more real. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the car lot, turning windshields and chrome into warm flashes of gold and amber. The kind of light that made even worn-out sedans look hopeful. The kind that suggested second chances without guaranteeing them. For the first time in months, I thought maybe that included us. The phone rang, sharp and insistent, pulling me back into the present. A customer, most likely, someone who needed a reliable car, someone whose problems were still solvable with paperwork, honesty, and a handshake. I answered on the third ring. Reid's Reliable Rides. This is Reid speaking. How can I help you? Because in the end, that was the truth of it. Not revenge, not control, not carefully engineered collapse. Just showing up, doing the work, and being accountable for what you built next. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when everything first fell apart. But maybe, just maybe, it was the ending we'd earned.